Hey, Crazy Fives. So here's the second part to understanding a little more in depth about what is a five and where does a true five, come from. And see, when we ask you to focus on the five, what we're saying to you is that everything in your life can be enhanced. Everything in your life can be enhanced as a five, especially, but I believe it's true in everybody's life. That understanding the five helps everybody. See, if you're married to a five and you're not a five, well, it'd be a good idea to understand who a five is. Or let's say, for instance, that you have a child that's born a five. Knowing that you don't need to medicate them, you need to actually celebrate them and be glad that they're the five that they were born to be, that they may be the next president of the United States or their next great inventor or the next person that goes to Mars. Who knows? Create some major cure for cancer or something else because they're willing to look outside that box. It is their nature to do that. And are they disruptive? Sure they are. Are they a kid that probably challenges everything and hears what they want to hear? There's no question. My son has two boys, and he called me right after the book was written. He had a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old little boy. And he said, "Dad," he goes, "I just now dawned on me what Focus on the Five is really about." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Well, I had these two sons." And he said, "I had this brand new couch." And he goes, "The two boys were jumping over the back of the couch. And I was on the phone. I hung the phone up. And I said, 'Boys, come here.' And I grabbed them both by their shoulders. I looked them in their eyes. And I told the one that was 1 year older, Oscar, I said, 'Oscar, we have a rule here in this house. We don't jump over furniture.' And I looked over at Garrett. And I said, 'Garrett, did you understand what I just said?' And Garrett goes, yeah. They both understood. So my son got back on the phone a few minutes later. Sure enough, one of them jumping back over the couch. It was Garrett. Oscar, he sat down on the couch reading a book and, like, I'm not supposed to be doing that. In fact, he even looked at Garrett at one point and said, "You're going to get in trouble doing that." And Garrett says, "Hey, watch me." And he goes back over the couch and does it about 3 or 4 times. Patrick gets off the phone. My son, he's just livid. He's like, "Are you kidding me?" But he just read the book, Focused on the Five, so he thought, I'm going to try a different approach than just punishing him or making him stand in the corner. So he calls both boys over again. He puts his hand on both shoulders and he says, "Oscar, what did you hear me say a few minutes ago about the couch?" And Oscar says, "Well, your rule, Dad, is that we're not to jump over the couch. It tears the couch up. It's not a good thing. Mom unhappy. It's just a rule. We don't jump over furniture." He said, "Very good, Oscar." He said, "Good job." And he looks at Garrett, the 1 year younger one. And he says, "Garrett," he said, "let me ask you a question." He said, "What did you hear?" And Garrett immediately looks down at the ground. Doesn't want to answer his dad. He knows punishment's coming. And so Patrick thinks to himself, I'm going to try a different approach after reading the book Focus on the Five. Maybe I have a son here who's a five. And he says, "Garrett, look, you won't get in trouble." He said, "I just really want to understand what you heard Dad say a few minutes ago when I talked to you guys." He said, "What was the words you heard me say?" Garrett kind of sheepishly looked up at his dad and he goes, "Well, you said I can't jump over the couch, Dad, but I can. See, you saw me. I can jump over the couch." See, the point there is that we, in this group that I told you about earlier, see life in 2 different ways. So we make choices in 2 different ways. That top 20%, they have a tendency to listen to life and see life in a different view when they hear things. They hear we can't do it. It's a challenge, a personal challenge that instantly kicks in the endorphins in our body and says, "Oh, watch me do it. I'll do it." And then the other group says, "That's the rules. That's the rules of the world. That's the rules of the universe. And I need to abide by those rules. And I need to stick to those because there's consequences if I don't abide by those rules." So as crazy as this may sound, a large part of the people that are in prison today are probably in that upper 20%. But with that said, a larger portion of them, certainly a large portion of them, are in the libraries that we go to read books today. They're full of fives because they're the people, but I believe they're a mixture of fives, and that's where we're headed. Are they all risk-taker fives? No. They're true fives, and that's what I want to explain to you, the difference between a risk-taker five and a true five. So, we went over the 5%, 15, 30, and 50%. And don't get hung up on percentages and numbers. It's really easy to get confused on that. It's just a percentage of the population. But if you have a clear understanding of this, when you're talking to someone, you know pretty fast there's a 50-50 chance they fit into this category down here, they're conservative. So if you're trying to convince a conservative person to make a choice on this level, Are you wasting your time? Probably. I mean, they're not going to make a choice or a decision until they see one of these people try it first. Someone in their life who is a decision maker, they have already put out front in their mind and said, ha, I don't do anything until Charlie does it. My brother Bill, or whoever. My best friend Martha. There's always somebody in a 50%er's life that they have used as their front person. It's the person that they mentally communicate with on Facebook or on the cell phone or have lunch with regularly and say, did you buy that new cell phone? Oh, how do you like it? And guess who bought the new cell phone, the newest model? Always. It's the extreme fives. It's just, they're called early adopters in the marketing world. But that's just the nature of who does that. I mean, who else would take a risk and buy something that's unproven? Well, because they love shiny objects. Fives, in their nature, goes, squirrel, woo. They can't help it. It's reflex for them. Ever seen a dog that chases a rubber ball? And some dogs you can throw the rubber ball and they could care less. A true five dog, you put it down a bowl of food and you take a red rubber ball and throw the red rubber ball. Guess which one they'll go for? The red rubber ball every time. Even though there's food sitting there in front of them. But the 50%er dog, they're going, hey, there's food on the table. I'm eating it. I'm going to make sure I'm full. I'm going to store up what I can get now because I'm conservative. I believe it exists in all things that can think, that can make choices, animals included. So let's break this down a little bit farther. This is where it gets pretty interesting. You really, really want to dive deep on this. Watch this. So each one of these categories also has a category that exists within it. Every single one of these break down just like this one here. So within the 5%er category, there is a group that are doers. They are make it happen kind of people. There are people that says, you know what? I failed the first time, but I'm going to try it a different way. I'm going to come back and do it again. But the rest of the world's saying, you know, you got hurt the first time. You got a broken bone. Remember Evel Knievel? He didn't know how to stop. He was this extreme category right here. See, this category breaks down again into 4 categories. Each one of these categories do that. Each one of these categories break into 4 categories. And when you understand this mentally, it'll be easier for you to understand people. So first of all, ask yourself, which category are they in? 5, 15, 30, or 50? And then, are they a 5, 15, 30, or 50 within that category? Give you an example. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum, the 50%er. You ever met somebody that's highly conservative? They are totally proud of it. They take the safe zone on everything they do. It doesn't matter whether or not it's buying ice cream. They go with vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. They won't go with mint chocolate chip. They won't go with Rocky Road because unless that somehow, some way, accidentally they tried it and they went, that's pretty good. And I know 4 of the people that eat Rocky Road, so I guess I'll eat Rocky Road now. I'm probably trying to make light of this, but I think you get the point. There is that extreme in everything. Well, the 50%er of the 50%er is that extreme. And that is a large group of people that just won't buy that new fancy cell phone until, in fact, I saw a guy the other day, and I have one of those new phones that flip open, that has a double screen. It's got a screen on one side, the double screen on the other side. I was one of the first ones that bought one in the state of Missouri. Shortly after I bought it, I was sitting in a restaurant, and I saw a guy sitting over there wearing some Walmart clothes. Nothing wrong with Walmart. He looked very conservative, nice looking guy, and he flipped open his flip phone. He had a flip phone, but he had the old kind flipped up. I didn't even know they made them anymore. I thought they all died, but nope, this guy had one. Now I'm just betting. I would have bet my last dollar that, because I'm a 5%er by the way, I would have bet that he was in this category right here. He was the conservative of the conservative and dang proud of it. A penny saved was a penny earned. He would be the person that there was a penny laying in the parking lot, heads down or heads up, he'd reach down, pick up that penny and put it in his pocket. A 5? Probably not. An extreme 5? Probably not. Because they value things differently. They see life differently. They make choices differently. And again, there's no right or wrong to this. It's just the nature and the pattern of how we do it. My voice may sound like I'm biased, but I am biased because I am the extreme that I am. But I have learned to understand, and I have learned to accept that we all live together, we're all connected, and that we all make choices differently. So I think you get the principle of what I'm talking about here. That there's a 5, get this, there's a 5% in each of these categories. See, there's this 30%er. We talked about 30%er. 30%er is a conservative-minded person who's been influenced by a risk taker, and they say, okay, I see the benefits of it. I'm not a risk taker. I am a person who makes very methodical decisions, makes methodical choices, but I do make those choices. Now, what's interesting is to think of the different professions that fit into these different categories. See, if you're hiring somebody, you might want to know some of this stuff before you hire somebody. Figure out which category they're in. Who's going to be the customer? Who's going to be the employee they're going to be working with? See, in other words, if I'm going to hire somebody who's going to work with a whole bunch of conservative people, who's the best person for me to hire? I can tell you as a manager, it's a 5% of the 50%ers. You know why? Because they get them. They know who they are. They know how they function. They know how they think. They know whenever they come into work and say, I didn't make it to work because, they instantly know, well, I know why, because you're like me. I know you, you know me. We don't clash. We know each other. We understand. We get each other. But I am the extreme of your category. So you're not going to pull one over me. I've done it all. I am the risk taker of our category, loosely said. But you get my point. They are the doers. They're the overachievers. They're the people who says, you know what? Even though I'm conservative, I still want out of life. I want the brass ring. I do want it all. I just got to do it within my category of way I make choices. Does that make sense? So a lot of your managers of restaurants, this group right here makes the best manager. You can see why. Because if 50% of the earth is conservative, then who's the best person to manage that McDonald's? Arguably, that person right there. Unfortunately, there's a large number of them. So I would suggest that if you're filling that role, look for that kind of a person. See the benefits here? Now, the next category, the 15%er, just know and understand who they are. They're probably not as motivated to make it all happen, but it breaks down in each category. It keeps it an ever-ending cycle. Just know who you are, where you fit in that category. Let's go to the 30%er. Now, notice that this is 5, 15, 30, and 50. Just like it was in the bigger. It breaks down the same. So let's go to the 30. This 5 of the 30. Who's the best person if you're going to hire for a role as CEO of a company, who's the best one on the entire chart here to hire? I think it's been proven time and time again, so I've done my homework, my research on it. You show me a CEO of a company, a true CEO that runs the company and makes choices and makes decisions based on the way you want a company ran. Let me tell you who that is. It's this person right here. If I start a company, and I've started companies, the best person to run that company is somebody who's highly conservative in their thought process, with one caveat. As the founder of the company who took the risk to start the company, which odds are was an extreme 5, or one of this group up here, because they took the risk. I mean, who does that? Why not go with the sure bet, work for a corporation? But if they happen to be that person that doesn't end up in prison or jail, but actually succeeds and does well, guess who they want to hire to run their company? It's not another one of these, because they already are that person. They don't want another one just like them. What they want is somebody who'll watch their money and dot the I's and cross the T's and watch everything really closely, highly conservative. But I also want somebody that gets me, that knows me, understands me, that can still have some love for me, at least of the understanding of how I make my choices and how the company got to where it's at. But now, there's another factor to sustain that company and make it grow. Otherwise, it couldn't sustain and continue to grow. And that is, I need this person right here. I need the 5% of the 30%. And that is your CEOs. And that's almost always the case. You show me a CEO of a company, I'll show you 5% of a 30%er. The top decision maker in the conservative-minded individuals. That's who your bankers are. I can go down a list, but that's just by the nature of. This 5% down here in the 50% group, I missed one. Most of your non-for-profits, almost all your non-for-profits are ran by a 5% of the 50%ers. You know why? Well, if you're going to put somebody in charge of a non-for-profit, who better than someone who's ultra-conservative? But they're a doer. They make it happen. They get out there. They're not necessarily motivated by money. I can tell you the one least motivated by money on this chart is this group down here. They are motivated by other things, spiritually, morally, a lot of other things. So it's a good balance. I really believe that these are the happiest people on the face of the earth. Honestly, I do. They put the least pressure on themselves. They're okay with status quo. They want to help people and focus on other things, especially this upper group right here of that group, the top 5%. Let's go to the 15%er. Complicated group. The 5% of the 15%ers. You know, they're complicated, but in some ways they might be the best group too, because they can make a choice and make a decision like that. They can move forward. They don't really need to ask other people's permission. They don't even necessarily totally have to research, but they probably are going to some, because they've bought into that idea, and it's a good thing to buy into. See, they've been influenced by this group down here. It says, well, you need to Google that, search it. And you need to go a little deeper than that. You need to do some homework on it before you make your choice and make your decision. Now, this group down here that makes a choice or decision, the 30%ers, they will most definitely always do that more thoroughly than anybody on the face of the earth. That's why they make good CEOs. But this group right up here, they will do it to a point, and then they'll just make a choice and go on. It's because it's in their DNA. They can't help it. You can't stop being tall just because you're tall and you think short. So the 15%er is that, and let me tell you who typically fills that role. They also make good managers, especially in the right roles in the right companies, especially a manager of salespeople, as an example, because they understand the extreme 5, and they also understand this group down here. They actually have empathy for them. And that has a big influence on how we make our choices in our life. It's how we feel about things, not just how we think or how our reflex is, but how our emotions are. See, a 5 is born, a true DNA 5 is born with something in the pit of their stomach to be a part of something much bigger than themselves. And I believe that's possible in any one of these 4 categories, that you can be born that way. See, I believe that's the thing that fuels you to become what I call a true 5. See, a true 5 is one of these 4 5s. That's a true 5. What I'm saying is they're true to who they are first and foremost. And then they strive to be at the top of that group. In other words, they're the leader of their group. And so if you're looking for a teacher, a leader, somebody to lead a particular element, know that you want to seek out the 5%er of their group to do that. So know your market. Know who the majority is of who you're wanting to lead, whether it's a teaching or whatever it may be. So, you know, I'm intrigued by the true 5. The true 5 is a whole nother study that psychologists and psychiatrists can tell you, but I just know it's a fact. I know how people make choices. I don't really need to fully understand how that happens. I just know it does exist and that they're out there. And I do know partly how that happens. It comes from DNA and by influencers, because it really comes from the principles of choices and what makes choices happen or not happen. You know, or do we make choices based on what somebody else has already chose for us? So all things in the world, guys, all and gals, all things in the world come from 5. They do. They all come from the 5%er in some form or another. All things invented, all things that are done, most all the accomplishments to move the needle forward in the world come from 5s, good or bad. They do, because of the way we make choices. And that's important to understand. So when you're doing business, understand when I say focus on the 5, the benefits to focus on the 5 is to understand the 5. Because it's not that they're better than everybody else. It's just that that's who is the cow out in front of all the other cows. And guess where they're going to drink water next? Wherever that cow leads them to. Guess where they're going to eat next? Wherever that cow leads them to. because the rest of them are just kind of following. I mean, they make choices. They decide where to put their foot as they walk. There's a lot of elements they make choices on, but the big choices, the big decisions, they'd rather let somebody else test the water on that and see. Because guess who's the first one to drink the water when they get to the place they're going to drink water? It's the head cow. It's just, and they're okay with that. The head cow's fine with that. Could it be poison? Could be. But he or she makes their decisions based off of whatever is available, and they have. See, I believe that one of the things that motivates the 5 of the 5s, and that's really what we're talking about, is that extreme person who's just pioneers. They're the first ones to volunteer in war when they said, somebody's got to jump out of the foxhole and take out that machine gun nest. Somebody's got to do it. And everybody's sitting there thinking, I'm not doing it. I'm standing right here. I want to live. I like living. I want to breathe. I want to live to another day. I want to see my kids. But there's this one person in the foxhole that says, I think I was born for this moment. I'm going to be a hero right now. I'm going to jump out of this foxhole and I'm going to run real fast to the left, run real fast to the right. I'm going to keep running. I'm going to use every bit of common sense I've got, everything that I know within my body, because I've got this moment in time right now that gives me a chance to shine. It gives me a chance to be the person I was born to be, to be that thing that I know I was supposed to be a part of something much bigger than myself. And so they have a tendency to be the first ones up on stage with a microphone to say, let me tell you guys, what I think. So when you're understanding the principles of how we make choices, always keep these same principles in mind. I'll show you one last thing that's really interesting. If you take 5% of the 5%, and you take 5% of the 15%, and you take 5% of the 30%, and you take 5% of the 50%, let me tell you what that adds up to be. 5% of the human race. When I say focus on the 5, I'm talking about that group right there. That's a true 5. That's a 5 that is raised to the top in each of their categories and said, you know what? I am not going to stop until I become everything I was born to be. I'm going to be the 5 I was born to be. And some do drop into these other categories because they don't have that drive. They don't have that, I got to make it happen. See, I believe that one common denominator that sets them all apart is faith. It's the word faith. Faith is a safety net, even for the conservative minded. They believe that ultimately they're not in control, that there's a bigger being. I call it God. You can call it whatever you want to call it, Buddha, whatever. But the key is that 5s are born with this thing in the pit of their stomach. They know they were born to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And they know that that's faith is what creates that. It's their safety net. It's the thing bigger than themselves. That's what gives them that extra energy. That's what gives them that extra power. They can't even totally explain where it comes from. But I'm telling you where it comes from. It comes from your faith. 100% of these 5s, if you set them all down in a room at one time and interviewed them all and said, what is it? And asked them, do you have faith? Do you believe there's something bigger than yourself that exists? I believe that 100% of them will say, well, yeah, I do. I don't think I created this world by myself. I don't think that it just happened. I think that something bigger than myself created it. And I believe that. And I believe that thing knows that I exist and it knows whatever that is, God or whatever you want to call it. It's not about religion, by the way. This has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with the principles of faith. Understand, it's about the way we make choices. It's about the way that life moves forward. It's we wake up each day and we choose to be in a good mood, or we choose not to be in a good mood. We choose to make somebody's day and make them happy, or we choose not to. We choose to teach somebody, or we choose not to. We choose to sell and believe in the product. They say the best salespeople in the world, somebody who actually believes in their product. Well, guess why? Because we as human beings, no matter which category you're in, we're going to make choices based on the person who actually believes in what they're selling. It always kills me when I see somebody that sells Mercedes-Benz and they don't drive a Mercedes-Benz. For years and years, I used to laugh at real estate companies. And I would say, when I'd go to do a listing with somebody at their house, and I'd say, so you're thinking about listing with realtor A, B, or C, or me, D? And they go, yeah, one's my brother, one's my best friend, and one says they're the best realtor in town. And I said, okay. I said, let me ask you a simple question. Do all three of the first ones work in a real estate office that owns its office? Do they own their real estate? Because they're asking you to sell your real estate and be your professional. And you own your real estate. But the question is, do they work for a company that owns their real estate? You get my point. I always own my real estate companies. I own my real estate offices because here's the way I look at it. If you're going to sell something, you're going to sell yourself, sell your service, practice what you preach. Be the 5 that you were born to be. And so I am addressing this not only to a true 5, but also the DNA 5, and also the learned 5. That's this group here. They learn to be a 5 because they have desire and want. It's also in their DNA to be an overachiever and to make it happen. So I hope this helps. I hope this is a better understanding of what Focus on the 5 is. We're going to have more things coming out that explains it more in depth, explains some of the differences between us culturally. But bottom line is, most of your decisions come from this right here, this same principle. I love you guys. Be the 5 you were born to be.